Hey y'all, Fred here. Thanks so much for joining me today. We are going to take a look at this very interesting replica knife from AliExpress. I'm just going to leave it at that. I am not trying to promote these knives in any way. This is just a knife I chose to buy, and I want to show you and share my experience with it. This is the 3.5-inch version. It's a replica of the McNees MAC2, as you can see. I'm glad I waited for the 3.5-inch. I had been looking at the 3-inch and just trying to decide, do I want to grab that 3-inch or not? And glad I waited for the 3.5-inch, because this turns out to be the exact perfect size for me and my hands and what I like to carry. You're going to see me kind of repeat this theme throughout the video here. This is like the perfect full-size blade in an EDC perfect size carry package. We're going to take a look at the good, the bad, the ugly, and all that fun stuff. Before we get started, if you would please down below hit that subscribe notification bell. That really helps us get found on the YouTubes, helps grow the channel. Throw me a thumbs up if you got to leave early, thumbs down. Give me some comments if you think otherwise. As always, before we dive into the knife, I want to take a look at the box it came in. So this is the box. It is obviously an unbranded. I am certainly grateful that they chose to send a nice waterproof. It's got a nice rubber O-rings, one of these hard cases. That sure is a nice extra bonus that you get with the knife. I don't know if I mentioned it. I picked this up for $74. It comes with the standard paperwork that says, please don't show your photos on any reviews. And there's no branding, no inserts, no nothing. It just came in some bubble wrap in this package with that piece of paper. So again, I'm pretty happy with the box. I definitely am glad to have a nice little waterproof kind of hard case box I can use for stuff, but it's not at all like what you would get if you bought the real knife from the real company, which comes in a very nicely designed, branded cardboard box with stickers and cloths and all that stuff. And you know what? I'm actually glad this didn't come with all that they didn't knock off the packaging and the boxing and all of that stuff, because that makes this way harder to try to cheat people. That, you know, if you don't have the box, you're less likely or less able to swindle people into thinking that this is the real thing when in fact it is not. So I am perfectly okay with this box being what it is. Matter of fact, I'm even happier with that situation right there. All right, so let's do some size comps. It's really hard to get a sense of the size of knife on these videos. I watch a lot of knife videos, obviously myself, and it's always impossible even for me to tell, and I handle a lot of knives. So we're going to start with our Benchmade pair, which is the full-size Crooked River, which typically dwarfs every knife on the package. And then the Benchmade Bug Out, also a replica. And you can see it's just a little bit longer than the Bug Out. However, this is going to be a repeated theme. Look at the difference in the amount of blade that you get in almost the same size package. So that's what I really want to impress on you as we look at these. So Spyderco PM2, or in this case, it is the OK81 carbon fiber. And you can see it is definitely longer than the MAC2 here. Para 3 is clearly shorter than the MAC2. No worries there. But let's talk about even again here, this situation. Look at the difference you get in blade length from one to the next. More blade length here than even the longer, larger PM2, which is, you know, pretty full-size knife. Let's do some more modern. We have the Civivi Vision FG, which is slightly longer. And the CJRB Pyrite Light, same thing here. Look at the difference in the amount of blade that you get in this small package. It dwarfs all of these knives. So let's do one more match that's pretty interesting. So you may see some similarities in that. This is obviously Spyderco /Bowie knife. You can see that definitely there are some similarities in these two knives. And then, of course, the Migueron Moyarl, which is roughly about the same length. But again, you line up blade edge, which is what I'm doing, lining up the edge of the blades. Look how much more blade you get in this size of a package. So this is one of the reasons I really love this knife. Let's do a little bit side by side with these. So you can see the MAC borrows very heavily from the design of the 𝗙𝗵𝗁𝗖𝗟𝗀, which I'm sure borrows heavily from a million other designs that have come before it as well. I'm not in any way trying to imply this replica is a replica of a knife that's trying to clone another knife. That's just all silly talk, you know, that I don't care about that. But again, just very interesting, long clip points, big belly blade. These are nearly identical in size in most ways. Obviously some differences in the handles, but if you took that little piece out right there, even the contours of the handles, very similar in size and shape. All right, let's pull up the specs, take a look at the specs down the left side of the screen. You can see that the size of this came in just a little bit longer. I'm not sure why that is. The blade, however, is 3.5 inches. Closed length matches up just fine. The blade thickness, this is one place where it diverges a bit from the original one. This one is a thinner at where 138 thousandths of an inch instead of 150 thousandths. I'm really happy about that because this is it certainly doesn't look like a thick blade. I'm not going to call it a beefy blade in any stretch. But I'm glad to have the thinner blade because of the way it is ground. It's not until you get about halfway down the blade, maybe a little less than half, before you get this flat grind. That leads to a little bit of a thicker behind the edge measurement. However, doesn't turn out to be much of a problem in this one. Handle thickness is, you know, that's within tolerances right there. I'm going to call that still pretty even. They are both stone washed. In this case, they call it their atomic wash, which I like. It's kind of that dark gray, dirty washed, like you work in a concrete factory kind of wash on it. Really love that. It is a flat grind. It matches. The scales are titanium jigged scales in this case. The blade steel in the original comes magna cut. On this version, they say it is a VG10. I do tend to believe that. It's a very common thing. You'll see this a lot. 10CR 15 𝗍𝗵𝗁𝗍, which is the Chinese version of VG10 steel. And that's a very common steel over there. It's one that they have worked with a lot, so they're pretty good at it. You know, who knows about the heat treat? Could be good, could be bad. They say the heat treat on this thing is a 60 to a 61. That would be great if that is the case. They show some pictures of them testing the blade, so who knows? I don't have any reason to doubt that this is the VG10. That's not a particularly expensive steel over there for China for them to make. The weight comes in just a fraction heavier. We can call that a wash. It is a frame lock. However, there are some differences in the frame lock. We'll take a look at here in just a minute as we dig in deeper. The original knife comes in at just under $600 if you can get one. Although you can, they still produce them quite a bit. I got this one just under $74. I always like to measure behind the edge. As I mentioned, this is a little bit thicker of a blade because the grind doesn't start until halfway down here. So back here towards the back, we're at about 21 thousandths. As it gets towards that thicker tip, it widens out to about 31 thousandths. But we're going to see in a minute, that is not a big issue. Oh, there you go. Down at the bottom, I made a little note that in this one, as opposed to the original, this actually does include a steel lock bar interface with the blade, as well as an over travel stop. The original knife, if you were to buy it, is carbidized, has no over travel at all. There's no steel lock bar insert in there. So I kind of like that. They diverted from the original on this, and to me, that's a very nice upgrade. And I probably would prefer to have that steel over travel and lock bar interface as opposed to just a carbidized blade. All right, let's take a little bit of a closer look at this knife here. This is a real titanium jigged scales. So this is shocking to me. I have studied this. Duty's daggers. Hopefully, I imagine most of y'all know Duty's daggers, Kevin Duty. If y'all haven't seen his channel, man, he does great videos, respectable guy in the industry, and he reviewed this knife, a jigged version just like this. And he made the comments, and I'm going to echo his sentiments, that this is a shocking amount of detail for anybody to carve into a knife. You can't just say to a computer, give me a random jig pattern. You literally have to program every single scoop and line and cutout and shape in here. If you look at a lot of jig knives, they are a lot of just rectangles and triangles when you really study them up close. This is incredibly organic right here. But One beyond that, I was wondering, well, did they just basically photocopy the original? And they didn't, because when I look at the, detailed HD shots of what the original jigged pattern looks like compared to this, they're obviously extremely similar, but they are not identical. So whoever created this replica knife created a unique jigged pattern. It is the same on both sides. I did check that out, but it's a unique jigged pattern from the original. So somebody programmed this into a computer to make it look exactly like this. It's shockingly good. It is not sharp in any way, in case it just looks like it on the screen. All the edges are knocked down. The edges are rounded and kind of smoothed out. There's no sharp edges anywhere on this thing. It is shockingly good, and I love this atomic wash dirty feeling. I didn't originally think I would like it, and as it turns out, I really have come to love this knife. It's one of those that you don't have to worry about scratches, certainly on your scales, because you've got this pattern already on it. It's virtually impossible to scratch or make it look any more worn than it already does right out of the box. And this is how it came, more or less, out of the box. I have carried this for a few weeks, actually extensively. I really have enjoyed carrying this knife. All right, let's take a quick peek at the pocket clip here. This is a rather flat pocket clip. I was very concerned when I first got this that, man, I'm going to have to take this off and bend it. It sits quite low, and then this bill doesn't come up very high off the edge. However, in actual real world use, I have found that it is just enough, and just barely enough, to clear every pocket that I have. Sometimes I might need to grab grab the other pocket with your left hand just to hold it firm if you got loose jeans or whatever. But it does slide right over there. It holds it extremely well. This is titanium, by the way. So there's no magnetism to that pin at all. So that is a titanium. It's not reversible. That's unfortunate for this knife. That is true to the original. However, the tension on this clip is perfect. I love it. It doesn't, because it sits so flat, there's no real hot spots to this clip. It is not a full deep carry. As you can see, you're going to have about that much sticking out of your pants. They do have some aftermarket clips. I think Lynch makes some aftermarket clips for these knives. I like the design, actually. I like the way this paddle widens out here at the bottom, and the pressure is on the main body of the frame and not on the lock bar. So I think they actually did a really nice. I think I'll probably keep this clip as it is. I was a little worried about it, but no worries there. Everything hardware-wise on this is a T8. All the body screws, the pivot screws, you can see there's a double-sided pivot screw there. It is not captive. Even the pocket clip screws are T8s. That's pretty cool. They did countersink these screws into the knife. So you can see from this angle, all of these screws have been, the scales have been kind of milled out a little bit to set pockets so that these screws don't ride above the surface. That's, again, just a very nice touch. One of the things I'll point out, which is somewhat of a negative really, but this is true to the original. Look at that stop pin. That is not a very beefy stop pin at all. Let's give you a comparison. See if you can see. This one is not a whole lot more, but if you can hopefully see, the one on the 𝗙𝗵𝘁 here is definitely beefier. And a lot of knives, this one's hard to see because it's black, just comes with a beefier stop pin. However, it's not an issue, and the original one has the exact same stop pin, so I can't really complain there. It's just something interesting to notice. These thumb studs are fantastic. They're not sharp. You can see the edge of them are kind of knocked down a little bit. However, they are perfect in terms of being able to access them and flip this knife both in forward and reverse flips. No problem there at all. So I really like them. Plus the design and the style matches the barrel spacers on the back. Again, all of that is very true to the original as well. All right, fit and finish is really good on this thing. There are no sharp edges anywhere, even with this lock bar area here. That's not bad at all. A lot of times that can be a little bit raw. That's not a problem at all. Talked about the barrel spacers, the lanyard hold. So this is, again, interesting. They just put a hole through both sides. A lot of knives will put some kind of barrel spacer in between that for you to pass your lanyard through. For some reason, they chose not to do that. And again, that's true to the original, which is just fine with me. I'm not much of a lanyard person. And so that works just great. Let's talk about the size and fit of the knife itself. I am a size large glove. You can see plenty of room for extra large and probably even double extra large. There is no forward choke-up choil. That's something I often like in my knives, but just doesn't exist on this one. That is quite okay. It is a little boxy of a shape here. But everything, again, all the edges are knocked down really nicely. It definitely fits comfortably in the hand. I'm really looking forward to doing some of my cut testing with it. So when I start cutting that wood really hard and have to bear down hard into it, we'll see. I don't expect the pocket clip to be an issue, but I'm wondering about the squared off edges of this knife. But just day-to-day EDC use, man, this thing is beautiful. Very good so far. All right, this is a frame lock, as we said already. The lockup is good and solid. I can't really judge because it's not really the titanium on steel here. As I mentioned, there's a steel lock bar insert. I'll bring up a little inset photo so you can see the inside of this knife with the over travel and the steel lock bar. It is very solid, all good there. Ooh, I see it's loosened up a little bit. So I took it apart just before this video. One of the things I will tell you, this is an interesting find, because you can see now that I have tightened that pivot back up a little bit, we're back to dead center on this thing, which is how it came. I have noticed that you have to keep some blue Loctite on this pivot screw, or it does tend to work itself back out of the knife. I also had an issue while we're talking about it with that steel lock bar insert. For some reason, first time it's ever happened to me, the screw on the steel lock bar insert backed itself out. It's not stripped or anything, it just was loose and it backed itself out, and I was feeling this detent lash, and I'm like, wow. I don't remember it coming that way. It just developed after a few flips. And so, inspecting the knife, took it apart, realized that the lock bar insert screw had backed itself out. So I took it out, Loctited it, never had a problem with it since. And I carried this thing and used it for weeks. But again, just like what happened there when I started this video, I had just taken it apart and put it back together. Probably need a little more Loctite on there. Just be aware, if you get one of these, that pin does tend to work itself back out, but the action on this is shocking. We're going to take a closer look at that in just a second as well. Again, the original one only has a carbidized and not a steel lock bar, in case I didn't mention that. Blade whack, so there you go. Here's your problem right here. That whack right there. Now, I need to go back in now that I've taken this knife apart and make sure that lock bar isn't an issue. But you don't want to blade whack this thing, because there you go. There's your main issue with this knife. Among so many beautiful characteristics and qualities, you can't blade whack this thing. I doubt that would be the case with the original at $600. So there's one of the downsides, and there are several downsides. We're going to talk about those in just a minute. All right, so the bearings, this is obviously running on bearings. It's the open face type bearings where one side is open. They are ceramic balls on the bearings, very smooth. This is a very hydraulic-y action knife. If you have been watching me flip and hold this thing, this is just as smooth as can be. It is a free drop shut, but it's not a banging drop shut. It's a smooth hydraulic drop shut. And I'll tell you this, there's no blade play. This thing is locked up tight. Now that I tightened that pivot screw, there's no blade play, up, down, left, right, no pivot lash, no detent lash. The detent on this thing is really good. It's a very weird thing. So it's not super clicky. It's more of a thud. And it doesn't feel like it's very strong right here. But I'll tell you, because maybe it's just where the thumb studs are mounted, the detent, it's almost impossible to fail this knife in either forward or reverse. The reverse flick is almost too strong in some cases. It definitely takes a little pressure on that back finger there to flip it open, but it is virtually impossible to fail. Part of that is because the action is just so smooth. Those ceramic balls, you know, normally those are less expensive type of bearings. I don't know if I just got a really good pair that are well balanced or something, or if it has to do with the way this knife was actually made. But the action on this is incredibly buttery smooth, completely drop shut, which is actually a bit of a problem. You can probably see here. If you're not careful, this thing is going to drop. There's nowhere for that blade to drop. There's no like detent areas. So if you allow that to drop, it's going to drop onto your fingernail. Now with a lot of knives, that's not an issue. However, as I mentioned earlier, this knife came incredibly sharp right out of the box. And one of the sharpest knives one of the sharpest, certainly one of the sharpest replicas, one of the sharpest knives ever that I have received out of the box, which is shocking again, because if you remember at the beginning of this video, the width behind the edge on this knife is not really that thin and slicey. This is not a particularly thin, slicey blade. It just was ground beautifully, and there's another pro on this. Whoever did the blade grind on this did an outstanding job. It is not a mirror finish, but it's getting close to it. You can certainly still see some of the striations where the edge was ground. It's nice and even on both sides. I haven't measured the angle, but I'm going to guess it's a bit lower. It's at most 20 degrees, could be as low as 18 degrees on this knife, and that may contribute also to the sliciness. But the problem was, because it's so drop shut friendly, you don't want to drop it on your thumbnail that many times before you're going to start doing some serious damage to your thumbnail there. So it's a mixed bag. This is a knife, I tend to turn it over and then watch, I'll just let it ride home, and it will even drop into that detent at that angle right there. Not straight up, but once you get it to right here, that thing will close itself. So I turn my wrist and then let it ride home itself. Shockingly good action, just beautiful. This is not a knife, over the Christmas holidays, we had family. I had some friends and my adult sons in town, and this was a knife I didn't even really want to let them hold or use, because if you don't get that finger out of the way, you're going to definitely cut something. This is just that sharp. It's hard to convey that, I guess, in the video, but I won't beat that to that dead horse any longer here. The other thing is there's no bounce. I don't know how they did that, but like no matter how hard you close this knife, it just doesn't bounce, and it's a thud. So when, I don't know how to explain it. It's something to do, obviously, with the stop pin and the way the back of the tang of the blade hits into that stop pin, but it is a very soft thud. Imagine if you took a very thin piece of rubber and glued it to the back of your blade tang so that it was where the blade tang contacted that stop pin. It almost feels like the stop pin's made out of rubber or something, which of course it is not. I tested it. It is steel, but it lands with a very soft thud, and it does not bounce. It's, it's not clicky when it comes in. It's a soft thud, and it does not bounce. I don't know what's going on with that, but I love that, the fact that it doesn't bounce out. So many of my knives bounce when you close them. It's a very frustrating thing. All right, we've already talked about this long blade. So for the size of the handle, you saw all the comparisons. You're getting this big, long, sweeping belly, 3.5-inch blade. Just like that Spyderco 𝗙𝗍. It is marked as Magna Cut on the blade. It does have all the regular McNees branding on it. I'm not real happy about that. I hate that they, have knocked off this American company. I think, honestly, y'all, I might try to see if I can wash away all of that branding. I don't give a darn about the branding on this knife. I care about the quality of the knife that I purchased, and so far, other than that little bit of a blade whack issue, the quality is phenomenal. The sharpness is off the charts. The action is beautiful. One of the best action knives that I own. I'd love to get rid of that branding so that people don't think I'm really trying to portray this as a real McNees. It's just great. There's no blade play. As I mentioned, the blade came perfectly centered. Not much of a sharpening choil. That's a bit of a downside. This is true to the original. But really, within one or two sharpenings because of the grind angle on this here, you're going to be right up against that. So that's going to be an issue as it needs to be sharpened up over time. So let's talk about maybe some of the negatives that I have about this. As I mentioned, it's a little bit of a thick blade, not as thick as the original, and that's a good thing. The flat grind is only partial, so that leaves you a little bit thicker behind the edge. But again, you just saw it's incredibly sharp as it is out of the box. Pocket clip's not reversible. That's a bit of a bummer if you're a lefty. The drop shut is almost too smooth. I don't know if that's a negative or not. You have to respect this knife. You cannot let that blade, as sharp as it is, come slamming down into your thumbnail more than once or twice. You are going to cut through your thumbnail. At least this one, as sharp as it is. That sharpening choil could be certainly better than it is. The stop pin's a little bit thin, although it hasn't been an issue, and it's what they use on the original. The jimping I didn't really mention is functional, but it could have been a lot farther down the blade. You know, if I'm going to grip this knife up here, which is where I'm going to grip it, I would have to have my thumb all the way back here. I don't usually have my thumb that cramped in. I really want to get that thumb out here, which means I'm missing that jimping right there on the blade. Although, again, it is true to original. All right, let's bring this thing home. So what I like most is the fit, the finish. I've never had this atomic dark wash style of a knife, all titanium. I've never had a full jigged knife before, and I didn't know if I would like those things, and I love them. I love the size of this. The butt of this handle, right where it's curved, just fits perfectly into the palm of my hand right there. So as I'm holding it to flip it out, it feels very comfortable. It's easy to grab onto the back side of this thing. The detent is perfectly dialed for these thumb studs, either front or reverse flip. Again, incredibly smooth action, maybe too smooth if anything. But all of the fit and finish, it feels comfortable. It's definitely plenty grippy with this jig tie. You get a huge 3.5-inch blade out of a relatively small size package. I mean, the handle is no larger than this 𝗟𝗏𝗄𝗅, but you get, you know, an inch more of blade on this thing. It is a good heavy-duty beater, strong knife, strong tip. Didn't mention the swedge. All of that is true to the original. I can't wait to cut test this thing. The detent is awesome. The fact that it doesn't bounce, it just locks in when you flip it closed. It's come as sharp as any knife I've ever had. I like the steel over travel and lock bar insert. Just the right combination of all the elements, man, that just suits me pretty good. I hate that they have knocked off a small American brand. That's unfortunate indeed. So I'm not obviously going to recommend this knife at all. I don't recommend this knife, as a matter of fact. But I can now understand if you had a Grail knife that you thought you might spend $600 on, man, this might be one of them. I mean, the real thing with real Magna Cut, if it's built even half as good as this and the fit and finish, you know, has to be even better than this. And that's what all the video reviews say out there. They all keep saying the same thing. Man, you just have to try this thing to understand it and experience it. Just from this version, this cheap replica version, the real one has got to be phenomenal. And if I had $600 to spend on a knife, I absolutely would be considering buying the real version of this knife. So again, they probably hate me over there at McNees, but for what it's worth, I would recommend, if you've got the money and you're interested in buying like a real deal Grail knife and you can spend $600, I would look into this 3.5-inch. The 3-inch would be too small. I definitely would not go with that, but this 3.5-inch is perfect. It's just, man, there's so many great things about this. I can understand why people love them so much and are willing to spend that kind of money. As always, I appreciate your time. If you would, please down below, hit that thumbs up, notification bell, help little guys like me get found on the YouTubes. Otherwise, I appreciate your time and attention today, and we will see you on the next video. Y'all have a great day. Thanks.